Welcome to the Matt O'Grady Coaching Podcast. This is where Matt shares all his ideas on how to be happier, more successful, and enjoy life to the fullest. Please go to mattogradycoaching.com and theliving.gratitudebook.com to learn more and receive your free micro-coaching session with Matt. Enjoy part 3 of this episode. Enjoy part 3 of this episode.
And then he said, well, something changed for us in the last year, and we've decided that we're going to let this thing get as big as it wants to get. However big it wants to go, we're not holding it back anymore. We're just going to let it go. And we've just signed an agreement with Hay House. And Louise Hay, by the way, was on the cruise, and they introduced her, and she said hi. But we've entered into this deal with Hay House, and they're going to be publishing our new book, Asking It Is Given, and we're just going to let this thing go and see where it goes. Well, where it went was like 4 or 5 New York Times bestsellers later, it completely exploded. It went haywire. And then, of course, you had The Secret come out a few years later, and it just, and everything that went along with that, and it just got even bigger than that. And so I just remember back to that moment so clearly with Jerry just standing there and just saying, we're just going to let it go now. We're just going to let it go wherever it wants to go. And just feeling like in that moment, I shared that moment with him where I knew it. I knew it when he said that it was going to explode. And sure enough, it did. And the repercussions are still being felt, and who knows how much bigger it's even going to get before Esther, decides to stop doing this or she makes her transition. It could be very many years. She's still a relatively young person, so who knows how many more years she's going to be doing this. And, of course, they're doing this live over the Internet now, and, how many, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people that they can reach. So that's my favorite Jerry story. Any of you guys have one you'd like to share?
I just want to say, Phil, that's really cool because it's almost like there was no resistance there whatsoever. It was like pure. They just threw it out there, no attachment to keeping it a certain way or it needing to be a certain way. They just said, let it go. And it's really cool because it's just kind of like surrendering. So that was a really great story.
Yeah, that's a good point, Laura, because it reminds, as you say that, it reminds me about how much we're holding ourselves back from getting that big. It's not the universe. The universe is all set and ready to expand, as fast as possible in all directions as soon as we let go of the resistance. And that's exactly right. It's like they let go of the resistance and the thing exploded. And maybe that's, something for each of us to keep in mind in our own lives.
Yeah, imagine if we said, okay, I'm going to let this go and see how big it becomes. I'm just going to let it go. What a free, liberating thing to say. And, yeah, you're right. We can learn a lot from that.
Well, I have a Jerry story that actually I've had to kind of piece together over the years, and I think the last piece of it kind of came to me today as I was thinking about it. And that is that, one of the businesses that Jerry was in, where he did very, very well, was he sold Amway. And my father and stepmother got into Amway probably in like 79, I think. And I'm pretty sure that because I do remember my dad getting a tape subscription that was all about it was somebody teaching Napoleon Hill, and I'm pretty sure it must have been Jerry Hicks.
Wow.
And I'm pretty sure we must have driven around, there was about two years where they were really, really, really focused on it. And I'm pretty sure we must have driven around. And I know that somewhere in that period, like maybe 1980, maybe the summer of 1980, my stepmother bringing me a copy of Think and Grow Rich and saying, all of the people that we're working with in Amway are all reading this book, and they're all doing really well, and you should read it. It's really important. So, of course, I was 14. So, of course, what I immediately did is, threw it in the bottom of my closet and put a bunch of dirty clothes on top of it because there was no way I was going to read this book, right? But I could still remember, her, and it's funny, I'd like to go to her and ask her if that's who that was, but that would kind of open up a can of worms I don't really want to do. But I'm pretty sure that that's who it was. I'm pretty sure that's who was involved here. And I've often thought, because I vaguely remember hearing his name before, I've often thought that it's possible that my parents were in his downline, if you know what that means in Amway. So,
yeah, okay. That's really wild.
Yeah, and they would have been about 5 or 6 steps. And it wasn't Jerry and Esther, it was Jerry and his previous wife.
Wow.
But they would have been about 6 steps up above, I think, 6 or 7 steps. So, it's just fascinating to me. When I kind of put that together not too long ago, I thought it's just amazing that that connection was there that long ago. And particularly Think and Grow Rich, because I really resisted that book because of the very thing that I associated with all these things I thought I didn't like Amway and my parents and that time of my life and all that sort of thing. And when I've read it, as in the last few years, I'm like, I keep thinking, wow, I really wish I'd read this when I was 14. But yeah, so that's I also want to share one other really brief story, and that is,
sure,
Jerry really is the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing now, because I walked into a workshop in San Antonio 4 years ago and saw how he did his business, and everything fell into it. It was like, well, of course. And I didn't see anything I had never thought of before. I just had never seen it assembled the way that it was done. And that gave me tremendous permission to go. I left that workshop and basically said, okay, I am a channel. This is what I'm doing. This is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And now I have a framework that I can start with. And I don't do things the same way that they do, but it was a place to begin, and I'm very, very grateful for that. Just immensely grateful.
That's great.
Yeah.
Jeanette, Laura?
Okay.
Well,
go ahead, Jeanette. Jeanette, go ahead.
No, you go, Laura.
Well, what I was just going to say is I remember one of the very first time I ever heard them, actually, when I was doing my coach training, oh, my God, a number of years ago, someone gave me a whole bunch of cassettes that were recorded, probably illegally, and this is the first time I heard about them. Here, listen to them. And I remember listening to them in the car and hearing Jerry on them, and I remember thinking, God, he's so goofy, because, the way he would ask some questions, and then he would just, he'd keep asking, even afterwards, and I'm like, wow, there's something very, I thought, silly and goofy, but yet it was very endearing as well. It kind of was such a nice balance to the whole thing. I don't know if anyone else thought the same thing, but I just go ahead.
He was so persistent and down to earth. I love how
down to earth.
I loved his
good word.
questions. Yeah, I did. I loved his questions.
Yeah, I mean, really, his questions are what was all about. For those who may not be, kind of aware of how it all came to be, it was through Jerry's questioning that, because Jerry was a very curious person about life and the universe, and he had a lot of metaphysical interests, and he was reading the Seth books.
Remember how it made Esther nervous when
That's right.
he had something from Jane Roberts in the bedroom? She's like, I don't want it in the bedroom.
Yeah, she found Jane, brought the picture of Jane to be spooky on back of one of the Seth books, and Jerry would apparently he would every once in a while he'd sneak in a little Seth to Esther. He wouldn't tell her it was Seth, but he would just say, "Hey, listen to this," and he'd read a little, snippet, that he thought that she would find interesting, and of course she did find it interesting, and that eventually they started meditating together, and then they saw Theo, which is another channeled being, and Theo basically told them that you've got this voice that wants to come through, and they told them to meditate, and they meditated, and that's how Abraham started. But when Abraham came forth, Abraham said, well, it was Jerry's questioning. You know, he had the desire. Jerry had this powerful desire to know. And Esther was the allower. You know, she really didn't care. She didn't care a heck of a whole lot about the details of the universe the way that Jerry did. Jerry wanted to know the how and the why and how it all worked. And Esther just wanted to enjoy life, basically. But that's the perfect marriage of asking and allowing. And they kind of did it as a co-creation. And it was through that desire on Jerry's part that really brought Abraham forth, and then the allowing part was Esther, and that's why they were such a powerful team like that. And that's really such a I was ready to say that's really such a unique thing, but I guess it's really not because we do it all the time, and we do it with people we co-create like that with people in our lives all the time. Maybe we're just not aware that it's happening. But I'm sure people can, talk about, things that they've co-created with, their partners, with their spouses, when you have that intense connection with somebody, and how it just seems to increase exponentially when the two of you are kind of focused in that way. So I guess it's not as unique as it seems at first glance. Maybe just unique in the sense of that in this very specific way of bringing in Abraham and so forth. Although it did kind of follow the model of Jane Roberts and her husband. Isn't that so, Frank?
Yeah, it's very, very similar. Although Jerry was much smarter than Rob and used a tape recorder instead of shorthand. And the other thing that they did differently, which I think is really significant, and from my perspective is an improvement, is they didn't, Rob and Jane were very, very, very suspicious of what they were doing. And they had a very skeptical mind towards it. They actually had a very scientific approach towards the whole thing. And they tended to keep it all, they kept meticulous notes. They were time-stamped. They were like notations of weather conditions and what had been happening during the day that might have influenced Jane and the way that she brought Seth through, things like that. They also had like these regularly scheduled appointments that they kept, very different. And the thing that is just amazing about Jerry and Esther is it's like, we are here to have fun. And, you won't catch Jerry making timestamps and noting how Esther looks, when Seth says this one particular, or when Abraham says this one particular thing. Jerry's like, we got a tape recorder, and we're going to record this, and then we're going to make copies, and we're going to give it to all of our friends, and then they're going to make copies and give it to all of their friends, and so on and so on. They approached it from a very, very different perspective, but it's still the same. It's the one is sitting there asking the questions and receiving the information, while the other one is able to relax and just let it flow through. Although I would say that of the two, Esther is much more of an allower than Jane ever was, because Jane always was very, very concerned and very curious about what she was saying. And I love what Esther has said about her, where she goes with that, where she's like, she'll say, I've heard her say this before, that she says that sometimes what comes through her doesn't sound any more interesting than the grocery list. And I know that feeling really well. And then the people on the other side are saying, no, it was actually incredibly profound, what you just said. And that's, to me, the mark of really good allowing, because when you don't notice what you're saying as the channel and you're not keeping track, really amazing stuff can happen. Really, really amazing stuff.
Yeah, a few thoughts come to mind as you relay that information, Frank. Is that, well, I guess one thing is that Jane and Rob were psychologists, right? I mean, they were scientists. So their whole bent was they were kind of coming from that mindset. It seems like, whereas of course Jerry and Esther weren't.
Thank you again for joining us on the Matt O'Grady Coaching Podcast. Until next time, please go to mattogradycoaching.com and thelivingGratitudebook.com to learn more and receive your free micro-coaching session with Matt.